Harvest Harmonics. Welcome again to the Profitable Farmer. And today is July 5th. Hope you guys all had a great 4th of July for all my American farmers. And for all of my farmers around the world who are watching this, hope you had a great Monday. Today has been a good day, and I really wanted just to kind of talk to you a little bit with a different approach, right? Obviously, most farmers that I talk to are at least aware of scientific knowledge, and they tend to look at data, they tend to look at information, they tend to look at case studies and results. And we've been really doing our best to provide a lot of that data, a lot of those case studies, a lot of those results, university trials, etc. And in an effort to kind of just I don't know if we want to call it justify or sort of prove the results that we're getting around the world. But I also wanted to today kind of just delve into something a little bit different for those of you guys who maybe aren't so much interested in science or data, whatever. You're just kind of looking at different things, look at different innovations. I want to approach this from a little bit different perspective because common knowledge. I think most farmers, even if they don't understand the in-depth scientific aspects of the chemistry involved in growing food, they at least understand the basics. Like if the plants don't have enough nitrogen in the soil as a chemical element, then they won't be able to grow, get their full potential. They won't be able to grow well. They'll have certain deficiencies, and they'll also not produce as well, right? So they add iron. Same thing with potash or potassium or phosphorus, calcium, some certain other minerals. So they understand at the basic level that look, if the plant doesn't have all the nutrients, all the chemical elements that it needs, then the plant is not going to survive well, right? And even other things like nitrogen, nitric oxide, these different types of things. What's not well understood, even in the scientific community, at least this is what I'm seeing, it's not generally well understood, is the physics behind biological function. And that's something that in the medical field, we've just really started to kind of wrap our minds around probably the last 10 to 20 years. This is a relatively new innovation in the medical field as well as the scientific field here with plant. And you look at it and say, what are the physics involved? Because the laws of physics actually play a pretty crucial role in the biological function of plants as well as other biological organisms, right? For plants, we look at the physics of how a plant deals with things like wind or things like heat stress or things like insects, right? There's a physical response to these things. Like the wind blows through the field and it causes a vibration in the plants, which is a physical vibration. It's not necessarily a chemical vibration. In other words, it's not something that's chemically in the air, like there's some nutrient like nitrogen or something in the air that causes a response. It's actually the physics of the wind itself and how it vibrates or shakes the plants, right? And that will create a chemical response. It turns out that there's been a lot of research done that insects, the actual sound waves, the minute sound waves of insects eating the leaves on a plant will trigger a biochemical response in the plant. But not just in the plant that's being eaten, where the leaves are actually being eaten up by the insects. It actually causes a biophysical response in other plants nearby. There was a researcher at UC Davis. His name was, I don't remember his name. I want to say Kaplan. That's not his name, but Carbish, I believe his name was, or Carbon, James Carbon. I'm sorry. And he did some research on sage plants and fields of sage. And what he realized is that he noticed that when insects were attacking certain plants in a field of sage, other sage plants, gave off the same biochemical response as if they were attacked also. And you can look it up again. James Carbon, Karban, I believe is his name. And he did a research study on this, and it was very interesting. And he actually mimicked the same sound, created the same sound uh, where he actually showed that the actual sound itself causes a biochemical response in nearby plants, not the plants itself, but nearby plants. And there's been other researchers, Gagliano, I believe, and some other researchers who've also done studies of how plants can communicate through biophysics, through the laws of physics or the laws of sound vibrations, right? And of course, we've all heard the terms, 20, 30 years ago when they did research on music, I think it was relegated to sort of a hippie or sort of new age type of a thing, but there's actually a lot of science behind it. Unfortunately, got kind of dropped because of that. It kind of got poo-pooed because of that whole movement. However, there was a lot of research into the effects of music or sound vibrations on the physical aspect of plant health, and the fact that certain sounds or certain types of music can actually stimulate plants, and other types of music can actually inhibit certain biological functions. And of course, that was 50, 60 years ago, right? That those research studies have been done. In the last 20 to 30 years, we've really been honing in on what specific frequency patterns or what specific physical stimuli, physical stimulation can actually cause these biochemical responses in plants. And it turns out that, of course, the Kyminasi plants technology, which powers our crop booster, is a complete systemic approach to that. We've actually studied, or I should say, the inventors, Mr. Baumelli, has discovered over 3,000 unique frequencies that are actually directly attributable to certain biological functions in plants. And when we stimulate a plant with those same frequencies, in other words, when we mimic what we've already seen in nature, we can get the same biochemical responses in plants. And it's a very unique sort of methodology. So we're not necessarily just adding more nitrogen or adding phosphorus or adding water or these types of things. We're actually just making the plant itself more efficient at utilizing the resources available to it. And because we're able to do that, because we're able to mimic those physical stimulations that already occur in nature, we're able to sort of make the plants more resilient. It's almost like we're mimicking the ideal natural environment without having to, conduct massive changes. I mean, you look at, for example, indoor growing and what they're doing with indoor farming. They're having a tremendous amount of success with indoor farming. And they actually, what they're trying to do with indoor farming, obviously, is control the environment, right? They're trying to control the amount of light that gets to the plant. They're trying to control the temperature so that the plants stay at a certain temperature. They're trying to control the humidity so that the plants have a certain humidity level. They're trying to control the nutrients and microbial activity in the soil, or the nutrients in hydroponics and these types of things. So indoor growing mechanisms are very hyper controlling the environment of the plant in order to get them to produce at a consistent level. In a field operation, it's very difficult to do that. It's very difficult to alter how much sunlight the plants are getting. It's sometimes difficult to gauge how much water you can give the plants, because if it rains too much, the plants get too much water. There's not much you can do. Likewise, when it gets hot for several days and there's a heat wave and you'll have several days of hot, super high heat, it's very difficult to keep those plants from being stressed. So what we're doing with the crop booster, with the Kyminasi plants technology, with physical stimulation, using the laws of physics to stimulate biological function in plants through biophysics, we're actually enabling the plant. We're sort of mimicking in the plant itself the certain frequencies that the plant needs to able to produce at a very high productive level. Now, if this sounds a little strange to you, I want you to just to take into consideration that this is already happening in nature. Without our technology, these physical stimuli, these physical stimulations in the plant are already occurring. It's occurring when the plant is under heat stress. It's occurring when the plant is in a perfect environment. It's occurring when insects or funguses attack the plant. All these different biochemical responses are being governed by the laws of physics. The laws of physics and those physical interactions with the environment are creating these different things in the plant already. So all we're doing is taking a look at a series of plants that are in really good shape and being really productive in a really good environment that is suitable for ideal growing conditions. And we're measuring those exact physical representations and those exact physical stimuli that is occurring in the perfect situation. And then we're applying those physical principles, those physical stimuli to plants in non-optimum situations. And so what we're doing is making the plants operate as if they were in the perfect environment with the perfect amount of sunlight, the perfect amount of humidity, the perfect temperature, the perfect amount of nutrients, et cetera, et cetera. And because we're able to do that, we're making the plant's energy level and energy output skyrocket to where they act as if they were in a perfect environment. Now, if you can imagine, when you go back to certain years on your farm, if you've been doing this for a long time, you can probably think of those years where you had a really good year. The weather was good, not so much insect pressure, not too much fungus. Everything was really good, and you got a really good year. And imagine if you can get every year in your farm to be just like that year, where just like that situation where everything was perfect. and you got a really good production, but you can do that year over year over year and just duplicate those results. That is what the Kyminasi Plant Booster really does. So we can show you case studies where we're getting 20%, 30%, 100%, 150%, 270% increases in yield. And sometimes you can look at those types of results and think, wow, that seems too good to be true. But think about it this way. If your plant was in an optimal environment where it had the exact amount of sunlight that it needed, the exact temperature that it needed, the exact humidity that it needed, the exact resistance to insects and funguses that it needed, the exact amount of nutrition that it needed, the right amount of water, and the ability to do all of those different biological functions at its optimum peak level. Doesn't it make sense that you can get results like that? Doesn't it make sense that you can significantly increase your yield and your quality? I mean, it should make sense to you because even if you just look back on your farming career, if you've been doing this a while, or if you haven't, look back at your father or your grandfather and ask them like, what was the best year you had in your entire career as a farmer? And imagine, and they'll tell you these stories. Oh my God, everything was great. You know, we got it in the ground. The nutrition was good. You know, the sunlight was great. The weather was great all year. Everything just broke perfectly. And then you ask them, okay, good. Now it's just sit there and imagine that ideal year, and imagine every year being just like that, without those big fluctuations of good year versus bad year. You have every year's a good year, maybe a slight dip from one year to the next, but it's not going to be a huge differential. That is ultimately what the Kyminasi Crop Booster is doing. We're helping plants stay at a very optimum level in terms of their metabolism so that they can grow faster and then produce as much fruits and vegetables with quality as possible in nature. Again, we're not turning the plants into some kind of Frankenstein monster or Jack and the Beanstalk. We're just enabling that plant to unlock its true potential that it has in its genetics so that it can produce as much fruit and vegetables and high quality fruits and vegetables as possible given the environment. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to take part in this situation, we have farmers jumping on board with this all the time. And we want you to be part of the future of farming today. We want you to see these same results. I want your farm to be part of our case studies, in our next slideshow next year. I want all the farmers that are using this in 2022 to be on our slideshow for 2023. And if you are interested in that, if you want to be part of the next wave of agriculture and be one of the first farmers, not everybody likes to be first. I get it. Not everybody likes to be one of those innovative guys that that can say, "Hey, I was one of the first people to use this." But there are guys out there who like to be that guy, who want to say, "Hey, I was the first guy to find this in Illinois, or I was the first guy in California to use this, or I was the first guy in Nevada to take advantage of this." If you want those bragging rights and you want to show your neighbors how good a farming operation can be and how easy it can be to get a really good year after year after year, then give us a call, 727-324-6750. You can email us at service@harvestharmonics.com. We'd love to take your order, issue a quote, and get you on the bandwagon so that you can have excellent results and you can be a profitable farmer here in 2022. Now, this year has been kind of a crazy year in terms of input cost and supply chain issues and transportation problems and all these other things. So doesn't it make sense to give yourself every advantage you can and create the best quality product, the best yield you possibly can, even in these conditions? Because if you can succeed this year, I guarantee when things calm down, you're really going to hit the ground running next year and years beyond by having a very efficient farming operation. So take us up on our offer today. We'd love to hear from you and see. We'd love to see you part of our slideshow as one of the innovative farmers that jumped on board with this before everybody else did. In the meantime, we'll hope to hear from you very soon.